The heat rolled off the plains like a slow breath, thick and unrelenting, pressing against the small town of Red Hollow until even the horses in the corral stood still, too tired to flick away the flies. Dust shimmered in the light, coating everything in a dull gold haze. It was the kind of afternoon when nothing moved, when even the wind seemed to wait. But from that far strip of the horizon, something was moving, a lone rider, black silhouette against a bleached sky, each hoofbeat measured and deliberate. The townsfolk saw her coming long before she reached the street. Her pace didn't quicken, didn't slow. The creak of leather and the soft jingle of reins were the only sounds she made as she approached. By the time she reached the hitching post outside the feed store, every man and woman who had the energy to lift their head from the shade had turned to look. She swung down from the saddle with a grace that spoke of long roads and little rest. Her duster coat was streaked with dust, her hat's brim shadowing most of her face. Only the curve of her mouth, hard, unsmiling, hinted at something simmering just beneath the surface. She tied the reins loosely, patted her horse's neck once, and turned toward the saloon. The sign above the doors creaked in the wind, the copper spur. Inside, the air was heavy with smoke, whiskey, and the faint, stale scent of old sweat and spilled beer. The piano in the corner sat silent, its keys long untuned. A few ranch hands played cards near the back, their laughter brittle and half-hearted. At the far table, facing the window light, sat a man who didn't join in the noise or the drink. Elias McGraw. He was broad through the shoulders, his skin tanned to leather, his beard coarse with the gray of years spent under open skies. He looked more like a man built to plow earth than spill blood. Yet the way he carried himself, the quiet awareness in his posture, the steady patience in his eyes, told anyone paying attention that he'd known violence once, and maybe hadn't yet forgotten how to meet it. The saloon doors banged softly as she entered, and the talking died the way it always did when a stranger walked in with purpose. The barkeep froze mid-wipe, the card players shifted uneasily. Elias glanced up, expecting trouble, the kind that wore a gun on its hip and a reason to use it. But when his eyes met hers, his brow furrowed. There was something familiar there, some faint spark buried beneath years of dust and distance. She stopped 3 feet from his table. "You McGraw?" she asked. Her voice was calm, almost polite, but sharp enough to cut the quiet in half. "That's right," he said slowly. "Who's asking?" She tilted her hat back just enough for the light to catch her face. Her eyes were gray, storm gray, and beneath one of them ran a thin scar, healed but not forgotten. "Then you don't remember me," she said. Elias studied her for a long moment. "Should I?" Her lips twitched, not into a smile but something colder, closer to disbelief. "5 years ago," she said. "Outside Laredo, you were hired to guard a stagecoach." Something flickered in his eyes then, just for a moment. A flicker of recognition, quickly masked. "Plenty of jobs like that," he said carefully. "Don't recall all the faces. You'll recall this," she said quietly. From the deep pocket of her coat, she pulled something small and metallic. For one tense instant, every hand in the saloon hovered near a holster. But it wasn't a gun she held, it was a single bullet, dull from years of being carried, yet the faint marks scratched into its casing were still legible. She set it down on the table in front of him. Elias looked at it, blinked once, and then his hand froze. The engraving, though rough, was clear enough under the lamplight. E. McGraw. He didn't touch it, didn't need to. His stomach turned to stone. "I reckon you made that for me," she said, her tone quiet now, almost trembling beneath its edge. "You gave me your word. You said if I ever showed it to you again, you'd remember." The room had gone so still you could hear the fan squeak above the bar. Elias stared at that bit of metal like it was a ghost come to life. Memory rose fast, unbidden, the flash of gunfire in the rain, the thunder of hooves, the screams. He'd been bleeding from a wound in his shoulder, crawling through the mud toward the wrecked coach. A girl, barely more than a child, had been trying to drag her father out from under it. Her hands were slick with blood and rainwater. She'd seen him and shouted for help. He'd raised his gun, fired the last shot he had, and she'd pulled him behind the rocks before the rest of the gang could finish them off. Before they were separated by the flood of the storm and the fire that consumed the coach, he had handed her that bullet, carving his name into it with the point of his knife. A promise, to repay what he owed. And now here she was, 5 years older, harder, carrying the weight of something broken inside her. He swallowed hard. "I thought you were dead." "Not quite," she said. "But others were." He heard the unspoken names. The father, the brother, The men on that coach. What happened after? He started. Her jaw tightened. After you left. Her laugh was short and bitter. They buried what was left of them in the mud. I buried my life with them. Then I started looking for you. Elias looked down at the bullet again, his voice rough. You think I ran? I know you did, she snapped, the calm mask cracking just enough to show the fury underneath. You left me there. You let them die. The trail climbed slow and winding through the foothills until the desert flattened into the base of the ridge. Evening had fallen fully now, the moon a silver coin hung above the dark outline of the mountains. The sound of hooves echoed against the stone walls, steady and heavy like the beating of two hearts trying to remember a rhythm they'd once shared. Neither spoke. The silence between them was too thick with old ghosts and unspoken things. Elias McGraw rode a few paces behind her, his eyes fixed on the back of her coat as it moved with the rhythm of the horse. The name, E. McGraw, still burned in his mind like the mark of a hot iron. The bullet she had shown him sat in his thoughts heavier than any weapon. When they reached the rise, she slowed her horse and dismounted. The wind tugged strands of dark hair from beneath her hat, brushing them across her cheek. Down below stretched a dry gulch dotted with mesquite and yucca, but Elias knew it immediately. He hadn't set foot here since that night, the night of the storm and the blood and the gunfire. This is where you left us, she said, not turning. He climbed down slowly, his boots crunching on the gravel. Where I nearly died myself. She turned on him then, eyes bright even in the dim moonlight. But you didn't, did you? Her voice cracked at the edges, not with anger now, but something rawer, grief that had dried into resentment. Elias took off his hat, ran a hand through hair gone too gray. I didn't run, he said quietly. When the shooting started, I got hit. Went down. When I came to, the coach was gone and the flood had come down from the ridge. I thought nobody made it out. She stared at him for a long moment, her breath coming shallow. Then she shook her head. That's a lie. It's the truth, he said. You think I'd carry that name on my conscience and never look for you if I'd known you were still breathing? For the first time since they'd met in Red Hollow, something faltered in her expression. Doubt, maybe. Pain, definitely. Then why the bullet? She asked softly. Because you saved me when you shouldn't have, he said. That bullet was a promise, that if you ever needed me again, I'd pay the debt. She took a slow step closer, her boots crunching softly in the gravel. I did need you, she whispered. After the flood, after my father. She stopped herself, looking away sharply, swallowing hard. There was no one left. I searched for you for years, McGraw. The Pinkertons said you'd gone north, maybe married, maybe bought land. I didn't marry, he said simply. Why not? He looked past her at the empty land, the same way he might have looked across a grave. Because I never shook the memory of a girl with a bleeding hand trying to pull her father out of a burning coach. The silence after that was heavy. The wind moved through the brush, carrying the low cry of a night hawk. She turned away, pacing toward a cluster of stones half buried in the dirt. You're not the only one who remembers, she said. She crouched down, brushing sand away from a small pile. Beneath the dust were crude crosses made from sticks and twine. I buried them here myself. Elias's chest tightened. He knelt beside her. Your father. She nodded once. And the others. I stayed here 3 days before anyone came. No one would stop to help an Apache girl, not after the coach robbery. They figured I was part of it. He clenched his jaw, guilt crawling through him like rust. You shouldn't have had to carry that alone. She turned her face toward him, eyes sharp again. But I did, and the world moved on. Until today, I thought the man who made that promise was just another ghost. He looked down at the dirt between them. Maybe he was, but ghosts have a way of showing up when they're needed most. Something changed in her face then, something small, almost imperceptible. The hardness eased, just enough for exhaustion to seep through. The moon had risen higher, washing everything in pale light. Elias took a deep breath and stood, pulling off his gloves. I've got something I want to show you, he said. She hesitated. What could you possibly have to show me? Proof that not all promises get buried. He walked to his horse and opened one of the saddlebags, pulling out a small wooden box. The hinges were old and worn, the lid carved with faint initials, E.M. He brought it over and set it down on one of the stones. What's that? Everything I couldn't forget. He opened it slowly. Inside were a handful of yellowed papers, old letters, faded sketches, and at the bottom, a ribbon the color of rust. He lifted it gently. Found this caught on a bush after the flood. I kept it. She stared at it, eyes wide. Her hand rose to her throat as if remembering something once precious. That was my mother's, she whispered. I lost it that night. He nodded. I thought so. Her eyes glistened as she reached for it. The fabric was frayed but intact, still soft in the middle. You carried this all this time. Didn't know what else to do with it, he said. Felt wrong to throw away what was left of that night.